Hello, darling. Welcome back. Thank you for continuing to let me share tarot with you. And it really is. It really is such an honor to have repeat customers, and especially repeat. I don't like the customer part, but visitors, repeat visitors, but also repeat visitors who refer me to people that they care about, because it just means um, it means that you really value what I am sharing with you, and that what I share with you has value, which um, I know to be true, but it's always good to get that feedback as well. So um, I'm continuing to use the Wildwood Tarot for now. It's still just a deck that's really resonating with me in this season. And I've been thinking about some of the things you've mentioned. Um, I have my notes over here, so that might be why you see me looking there. As I was meditating on you while I shuffled the cards, there were a couple things that came to mind I wanted to share with you right out the gate. Um, and the first is I got a pretty clear message that it's time for you to buy your own deck. I don't know if you have a deck or not. I don't know that we've ever talked about that, and I don't know that if you're even considering that. But there was just a pretty clear, like, it's time for you um, to transition into trusting a little bit more of your own intuition. And that's not to say that I want to ever stop sharing readings with you. But there, to some degree, there is an element of empowering I like to do for people, and I think that what I got was the one of the part of the message I got was to draw a card every day, and for me that was a really good practice when I first started with tarot, was doing some of my own readings and just doing very simple spreads, pulling 2 or 3 cards at a time and seeing what was there, and I would keep my journal handy and I would write everything down. So, just a little bit of advice if you're gonna, when looking for a card deck, um, I would suggest finding a place in your area that has a wide variety of decks, and these tend to be more new agey stores that cover a lot of bases when it comes to spiritualism, and give yourself time and space to really sit with the decks. And what I did when I got my first deck, I don't have it anymore. Actually, I gifted it to my friend. It was the Earth Spirit deck. I love that deck, and nostalgically, I still very much love that deck. But I got to a point where I wasn't using it anymore, and I knew she would, so I gifted it to her. But when I first got that deck, I think I pulled 3 or 4 decks out that spoke to me, and I set them all out. I was at the store and I set them all out in front of me, and then one by one I put ones back that just weren't speaking to me as much as the others, and that was the one that was left. So when I did my first reading with it, holy shit, I wrote like 2 or 3 journal pages with that. Just things were just popping, and that's what I knew. I messaged my psychic friend who'd done tarot readings for me in the past, and she was like, well, that's when you know. That's when you know it's yours. So, um, and then, okay, that was one thing that came up. And then the second one was, I really want to introduce you to my astrology guru. He has become truly my spiritual guru and guide. His name is Christopher Witecki, Witecki. He does a weekly video with things that are happening astrologically and how that affects us here on Earth. He works very much with like the collective consciousness, and how really we're all dealing with similar themes each day. We just may be on different like levels of intensity when it comes to how we're dealing with that. And then he also has a personal service where every day he sends an outlined, like, by the time of day, things to think about based on what's going off the planets. He has a daily pep talk, and Julie might have mentioned this to you. I listen to the daily pep talk. I try to every morning, and he has breath work that he does at the end. He just has really great things to think about, and affirmations and mantras that he sends throughout the day as well. So it's only his weekly videos are free. Those are on YouTube. His service is only $3.99 for the first month, and then it's only $19.99 after that for each month. And I'll be very honest with you. Even in moments when I am flat broke and can't pay my rent, I keep my service, because he is truly guided me through so much and helped me to see and change my perspective on things. And the affirmations alone have been just life altering. So those are two things that came up that were not a part of your reading, but that definitely came up when I was meditating on you, and I felt I needed to share. So otherwise, let's get into it. And I am, just so you know, I'm not reading reversals on these. I'm just trusting that the messages are going to come through either way. There's a lot of debate in the tarot world about whether to read reversals or not and what that means. And I have read reversals in the past. Reversal is just when the card comes out of the deck upside down. And I'll be honest, it's kind of a parlor trick that I don't care to engage in anymore. That's how I feel about it. Reading the cards is challenging enough, and I really, especially these cards, are very layered and complicated, which is what I like about them, because I feel like they give a really big picture reading. But I just trust that Spirit's going to relay the message whether or not the card is right side up or not, and so I put them all up right side up, and I go from there. It was just like another layer of discernment I did not want to add. So that's just my clarification. If you're like, why is she messing with the cards? And is that going to affect my reading? And just note that, like, I still am open as a vessel. I just don't want to add another complication that seems unnecessary to me. So anyway, I've got everything laid out. Celtic cross spread, of course. My go-to, unless I get a different request. So I'll let you get a good look at that. Excuse me. And then I'm going to pull up the actual Celtic cross spread, because I like to keep that handy. There's just parts of it on the right side. I tend to go with my gut, but lately I've been feeling like I need to stay more true to the spread. At least this one spread that I found, I try to keep it consistent, so that way everyone knows what we're doing here. Okay. Okay. So in your the three cards that symbolize you in your present, near or recent past, and near future. In your present card, we've got the Ace of Arrows, which is the breath of life. This is where you are in your present moment. This feels very light, and maybe it's just because I'm surrounded by spring and blossoms and sun, but that's really what this card feels like to me. So it's probably good timing. There's a light freshness to you right now, and it's like you've turned a corner. I just had to ask Spirit if that was just me, because I've also been feeling that way lately. So it must just be in the collective consciousness that, like, there's, and it is, like, if you think about it, it really is like what spring is all about. We've turned a corner. We've made it through the winter. It's time to open the doors, open the windows, celebrate the blossoming of trees and leaves and flowers, and um, and just really like it's that open like feeling of gratitude. And I like that this is called the breath of life. I also get the feeling it's like breath of fresh air. Like that's what's going on right now. It's just there's a breath of fresh air, and might be good to. It might be good to make a list of things that you're grateful for right now, and especially things that are feeling like, yeah, this is a turning point situation. So, for instance, for me, I started a new job last month at a yoga studio, and it's going to be a situation that I can keep throughout school. I can just pull my hours back, but I can still stay working there. So it's going to be a nice little extra bit of income that I'm not used to. I'm used to being like stretched really thin and even sometimes not having anything. And it's a really positive environment. It's very, everyone I've connected with that I work with has been really like, it's kind of, I'm not going to lie, it's kind of a bougie studio. I mean, it's in the suburbs and it's in a fairly wealthy community. But the people I've met and connected with are very genuine and have a very genuine atmosphere about them. And so I like going to work. I mean, I'm glad I have the day off. But I also like being there. And that feels, and I've recognized that like I haven't had many work environments that I've really liked being in. And that felt like a turning point for me. Like this is a turning point situation for me. So make a note of that for yourself. Things that have felt like turning point situations. And it's funny, your recent past card is the Page of Wren, and look, she's in the snow. And the wren is and the wren is a feisty little animal. Like she's come up in a few readings recently, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. But the thing I always think about with wrens is when I worked at my yoga studio in Indianapolis, we had all these bushes along the windows, and they were full of wrens. Like they were just full, or I guess maybe they were even sparrows, but they looked like wrens to me, and they all winter, I mean, that bush was dead, right? Like there was no greenery on it or anything, but they were still packed in there and they were surviving. There was very much this element of like, we're going to make it through. And sure enough, spring came and they were just everywhere. So, and that's the feeling I get, is like, that's your recent past, is there's this feeling of on survival mode. Just got to make it through the winter. Just got to wait until the snow thaws and the spring comes again. And now you're going through this phase of like that's clearing. You're able to take a step back, take a deep breath. In your near future, not surprising at all, is the Ten of Vessels, happiness. And just look at how lush and green and overflowing this river is, and into these vessels. That's on your horizon. Okay. Yeah. So even the landscapes in these, there's like, the landscape in the recent past, I mean, it's covered in snow and it is melting a bit, but it's still very heavy. And then the present, it's like all green. Like the grass it's just like, it's like a hillside, but it's like there's no mountains or water or anything. It's like, but life is coming back to the area. And then this new one, it's like lush greenery, water overflowing, like things are happening. The moon on the water is the card covering these, which is in the bridge or obstacle. I want to see, this one had an interesting way of calling it what helps or hinders you. Yeah. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Head, chest cold. Still recovering. The moon on the water. Okay. Um, Connect with your witchy self. And there's so much about this, the animal symbolism, the full moon. Um, we have a full moon actually coming up at the end of this week, I believe. And I don't know if I've talked to you. I'm pretty sure we've talked about having moon rituals. So getting your deck before that point might be a good thing to do. Biddy Tarot has a really great, she always puts out a new moon and a full moon spread. And that's BIDDY Tarot. I like to do those, and I like to keep those in my journal so that I can reflect on them. So new moon is really where you're planting the seeds, resting, recovering. Full moon is where you're harvesting the seeds. Now, most cycles do not go 2 weeks. Like, it's not like you're going to plant something at the new moon and harvest it at the full moon, though it's possible. I'm not saying it's outside of the realm of possibility. What I've been shown and told is more like 6 months. So what you plant this new moon, you'll start to reap the benefits in, say, October, or this past full moon, October, November timeframe. And so to me, that's why it's really good to keep all of those journals and those notes, because you can really flip back and see like, oh, okay, yeah, that is something that I planted the seed for. But there's when I meant about like your witchy ways with this card is there's some aspect of, if you really want to pass into this phase of happiness that's on your horizon, it's really going to mean embracing yourself, embracing the fullness of yourself and your connection with the spiritual realms. I don't know if something's holding you back from doing that or not, but if so, it's really time to kind of pull those barriers out of the way. So in our hopes position, we've got the Guardian. And that's a skeleton of this like cave bear guy. Guarding the spiritual realm. So funny, interesting that it's in the hopes category. I want to see what pops up here for the Guardian. Oh, this is interesting because you brought up, okay. Okay, interesting. Okay, it says the guardian spirit of the beast challenges those who would enter the cave of ancestral memory without understanding the nature of their own darkness. And that just reminded me that you asked about past life stuff. It's so fascinating. So, in your hope to access that information, I would say this card is here kind of serving as a warning. Not maybe a warning. Warning is a little too edgy. It's more serving as a sign, almost like a sign at a park where it's like warning, warning. I said it again. Well, anyway, caution. That's a better one. Caution. The edge of the waterfall is in 300 feet, right? Like, so that way you're like, oh, proceed with care. So the guardian I really believe the guardian is here, or there's a sense that the guardian is here to say, understand the nature of your own darkness. Okay. And the reason for that is because what you're wanting to understand, what you're wanting to travel into is unknown. And like this says, it's unknown and untrodden path. Its destination is shrouded in gloom. No inner light burns to show a way through. Before the path may be followed, the guardian must be faced and mastery of one's own spheres achieved. So, 2 questions. Why do you want to access this past life stuff, this ancestral stuff? And those are a little bit of 2 different things, but they're also in a similar vein, right? Like, Ancestral tends to be your human lineage, so what's affected you genetically, biologically. Your past life stuff is what you have carried karmically with you into this life. So they're both like the past converging on your current self. Um, I would really encourage you to sit with why you want to go there. And I'm not that asking why doesn't mean it's bad you want to. It's just that it's very important for you to understand what your motivation is and your intention, as well as your expectation. What do you hope to find? Two, what is your shadow? What are your dark places? And that's not going to be an easy answer, okay? Because there's all kinds of reasons why we don't know what our shadowy selves are. Sometimes that's just because we haven't. I'm using a lot of numbers and fingers here. One, I feel like it's because it's parts of ourselves we don't want to admit are true. So I have a friend who's a pretty radical teacher in this area. She's very much about admitting and embracing your shadow selves. And a lot of times we don't want to admit our shadowy parts because they're unacceptable socially. So, for instance, like she was sexually abused as a child. And one thing she's really come to face is that there's a part of her that is also capable of sexual abuse. And that sounds really ugly and gross. And that's why we keep it it's why it's shadowy, but that's also why we keep it like under wraps, right? We don't want anyone to know those parts of us are there. And they're the parts of us that maybe have fantasized like someone dying or killing someone. Like, I'm not saying, here's the thing. We think that by giving voice to that means that's who we are. What I'm saying is by giving voice to it, you're actually shedding light on it and then much less likely to do the things your shadow self wants to do. What the guardian is saying is if you don't face your shadow self and you try to go into the dark of the past, you're going to get lost and maybe maybe not find your way back. So doing shadow work is going to be really important before you try to venture into that. Past life and ancestral stuff is unfortunately what a lot of what lingers is the shadowy decisions that people have made or that we have made. And so when you decide to go back into those places, what you're basically doing is agreeing to face that shadow work. And if you don't know yet how to heal and reconcile those parts, you can become really overwhelmed. And so by sitting with your shadow now in this life, and just really facing it and healing it and doing the work there, you are then going to have the skill set necessary to go back into what you are wanting to face. So it's not for nothing. It's a lot like going to kindergarten. And it's not going to feel, I'll be honest with you, it's not going to feel like you're in kindergarten. It is going to feel like such advanced work. It is going to feel overwhelming at times. But it's like kindergarten in the sense that it's going to give you a foundation of skills to really work through the shadow so that when you do go back, you are able to distance yourself and face each of these pieces and bring healing to them. I think there's a lot, I think your desire is in earnest. I think it's a desire to do some really intense, intentional healing work. And so I want to affirm that for you. But I also want to encourage you that that you have to have a foundation of understanding first. And I think I've mentioned how Women Who Run with the Wolves, but I'm really going to highly recommend that again because I just think her that book, although it's like about using mythology to help understand the female experience, it's an instruction manual on how to heal our shit. That book isn't. The person who introduced me to it, actually, she called it her Bible, and I have to agree. I haven't opened it in a while. I actually think someone borrowed it from me. Oh, okay, I know who it was. Um, but she's trustworthy. Otherwise, I wouldn't let it go. But I really find that to be an incredible healing model for how we can work on and face our shadow. In the fears category, we have the Four of Vessels, which is boredom. It seems like a strange card, but the friend I mentioned before who's done a lot of shadow work, she has explained boredom as really a deeper desire for connection. And so I think the fear is that you're not going to get the connection you want. But I really think that if you're willing to confront and do the shadow work with love and compassion, you are going to reconnect to yourself in so many deep and abiding. That's a word that came to me. Deep and abiding ways. And I see abiding as like, abiding, it's like someone who's loyal and consistent and stays by your side. They abide with you. They stick with you through all of it, right? You're going to find a connection with yourself that really stands the test of time. All right, we're running out of time, so I want to make sure I get to these other cards. Okay, so your approach is the Page of Vessels, which is the Otter. And what I love about the otter is that it's an animal that can traverse both land and water. And so it has this way of kind of swimming through and then land and then jumping up onto the land, the water, and then, where the water is like the spiritual, emotional realm. It's all the unseen things that live below the surface. And then the land, of course, is everything that's very tangible. And so your approach is one that combines all of the things the strengths that you have, navigating the tangible material world with also being able to dive deeper. And that's a good, healthy approach, just so you know. The environment, you've got the World Tree as your environment. What you need to know is the Queen of Vessels, the salmon. We'll get to these. And the final outcome, which is the Knight of Vessels, the eel. And just a side note, you can tell these are all, and I've probably shared this with you, but the suits are different from traditional tarot. So if you do decide you want to look these up, Vessels is cups. You have a lot of vessels, actually. I'm just realizing. Wow. Okay. Arrows is swords. Bows is wands. And what's the fourth one? Stones in this deck is pentacles or coins. So what I find fascinating about you having so many vessels in this spread is that it's the emotional, spiritual world is really where you're meant to be. And I don't just mean right now, it seems like in general. So even though it's good that you're like the otter, that's your approach to things, I think where you're moving, which is why the outcome is vessels, where you're moving is into much more of the abstract, ethereal, I'll think of the word. I don't get it right now, but that realm. The World Tree, that being your environment, what that means to me is the universe is showing up for you. The universe is really behind the work that you're doing. Um, the Queen of Vessels, what you need to know. Sometimes it's gonna feel like you're swimming upstream, right? We think about what salmon do, and they spend so much time swimming backwards, swimming upstream against the current, so they can do their greatest life work, which is to lay eggs and spawn. And then they fade away. And I think we tend to think of that as a really sad, um, like, wow, they just do all of that just to have babies and then they die. To me, I see it as the bravery and the courage and the perseverance that they need and that they take on their journey so that they can create their life's work. Excuse me. So if it feels like you're swimming upstream, if it feels like you're putting all this bravery and effort and into what you're doing, that's okay. That's okay. Like the salmon, you are creating your life's work. And it may not be that you see that fulfilled until the end of your lifetime. So chin up, stay strong and true to the path, and keep loving on yourself. Keep allowing spirit to love on you, and spirit, source, God, universe, whatever you want to call him or her, them, allow them to love on you. Because really, if you think about with the salmon, they create their life's work, but it's like a blip on the radar for the time that it takes to get there. So the journey is so very important here. The journey that you're on is really what's defining, not necessarily the product you're creating. So if it feels like, man, I am doing all this work, but I am not putting anything out there, I am not, I'm not, I don't have anything to show for it, right? We have such a pressure on ourselves to show that the work we're doing is fruitful. Don't worry about that. It may be not until the very end of your lifetime where it's really made manifest just how much work you're doing. That doesn't mean that you're not creating results. That doesn't mean that you're not fruitful, because you are. You just have to recognize it for yourself. This is another place where it's going to be a good idea to take a step back and notice the ways that your life has been fruitful. It can be as simple as, so and so told me that they were thankful for me being there for them when their mom died, or they were really, somebody smiled at me when I told them thank you, or when I acknowledged the work they were doing. They genuinely smiled at me. I knew that they took that to heart. Let those be the fruits of your labor. Let those be enough, because you are not going to see the big fruit for a long time. And you're going to need these little ones to help kind of sustain you and keep you moving forward. With the Knight of Vessels, the eel being the conclusion card, I love this because it's almost like the end. I'm going this way, right? Like, it's kind of like, okay, good night, I'm going to bed. Except with the eel, it's like, all right, see ya. I'm going deeper. I'm going in. So what's the conclusion? You're knee deep, and you're going to go deeper. And it's okay if you tip the scales toward the spiritual and emotional realms and away from the materialistic, tangible world. That doesn't mean, I'm saying don't pay your bills or quit your job or whatever. However, when you ask yourself, okay, what does that mean? Okay, spirit, what does that mean for me to tip the scales? It may be something dramatic like that. It may be something that says, I want you to downsize your house. I want you to live simply, so that you have more resources to devote to this, so that you don't have as much weighing on you. You don't have as much demand on your time and resources and money, so that you can really keep pursuing this path that you're on. All right, we're at time. And I really think that was a lot. I think there was a lot in there. I apologize if that didn't answer all of your questions, although strangely, I feel like it did. And if it didn't, if it feels like it didn't, sit with it, sit with your notes, and really ask Spirit what your questions are. Like, how did what came up here apply to what you want to know and the answers that you're looking for? Many blessings to you. I look forward to doing your partner's reading here shortly, and I will be sending that to her. As always, please let me know if you have any questions, concerns, comments. I love you, darling. Take care.